A lot of independent artists believe the hardest part is getting people to listen. If they can just get streams up, followers up, attention up, the money will eventually come. But for most artists, that moment never arrives. Not because they aren't talented, not because they didn't work hard, but because the way they think about money is disconnected from how money actually works. Here's a reality most people don't talk about. The majority of independent artists never make even $1,000 from their music. Not in a month. Not in a year. Ever. That number isn't meant to discourage you. It's meant to ground you. Because when expectations don't match reality, frustration builds. You start wondering why the effort feels so heavy and the returns feel so light. Why people support verbally, but not financially. Why progress looks good online, but doesn't change your situation. $1,000 isn't rich. It's not success, it's not winning. But it is a meaningful threshold. It's the point where music stops being purely symbolic and starts becoming practical. And most artists never cross it. Not because it's impossible, but because no one explains how income actually forms at the independent level. This episode isn't about blaming platforms. It's not about shortcuts. And it's definitely not about get-rich talk. It's about understanding why money stays elusive for so many artists, and what usually needs to change before income becomes real. Because once you understand that, you stop chasing illusions, and you start building intentionally. Most independent artists believe money comes after attention. More streams should lead to income. More followers should lead to support. More visibility should eventually turn into stability. That assumption makes sense, but it's incomplete, because attention and income don't have a direct relationship. Streams don't pay based on effort. Followers don't pay because they exist. Visibility doesn't pay unless it's connected to something people can actually support. A lot of artists are waiting for money to show up automatically. They assume that once the numbers are high enough, income will kick in on its own. But that's not how it works at the independent level. Streaming platforms pay fractions. Social platforms pay nothing. And attention by itself doesn't decide to become financial support. Money doesn't come from being seen. It comes from being supported. And support only happens when there's a clear path. When artists don't understand that, they build everything around exposure. They chase playlists. They focus on reach. They measure success by numbers going up. But they don't build systems that convert attention into income. No clear next step. No reason for listeners to support directly. No structure that makes spending money feel natural. So the attention passes through and leaves. That's why so many artists feel close but never cross the line. They aren't missing talent. They aren't missing work ethic. They're missing clarity around how money actually enters the picture. Income doesn't show up because people listen. It shows up because people decide to support. And that decision only happens when the artist creates the conditions for it. Understanding this is uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Because once you stop waiting for money to arrive on its own, you start building intentionally. And that's when income becomes possible. There's a gap most independent artists fall into, and nobody explains it clearly. It's the gap between attention and income. Artists work hard to get people to listen, but they're rarely taught what happens after someone presses play. So when attention increases and income doesn't, confusion sets in. That gap isn't accidental. It exists because attention and income are built on different mechanics. Attention is passive. Income is intentional. Attention can happen without commitment. Someone can listen, scroll, and move on without ever making a decision. Income only happens when a decision is made. A decision to buy. A decision to support. A decision to invest. Most independent artists never close that gap because they never design for the decision. They focus on being heard, but not on being supported. They celebrate reach, but don't think through conversion. They build presence, but not pathways. So attention floats in and drifts right back out. That's why artists can have thousands of listeners and still struggle financially. The system worked exactly as designed, just not in their favor. The uncomfortable truth is this: income doesn't come from how many people know you exist. It comes from how many people feel connected enough to support, and connection doesn't happen by accident. It's built through clarity, trust, and repetition, through giving people a reason to stay. Through making support feel natural, not forced. When artists don't understand this gap, they assume the problem is scale. They think, if I just had more listeners, this would work. But more listeners without structure just means more missed opportunities. Closing the income gap isn't about chasing bigger numbers. It's about building better systems. And once you understand that, the way you approach music, content, and money changes completely. A lot of independent artists get excited about small wins, and that makes sense. The first sale, the first payout, the first time music generates any money at all. Those moments matter, but where things go wrong is when small money gets mistaken for sustainable money. Small money is random. It shows up in bursts. It feels good, but it doesn't change how you move. Sustainable money behaves differently. It's predictable, it's repeatable, and it's connected to systems instead of moments. Most artists never make the transition because they build around wins instead of foundations. They celebrate a good month and assume momentum has arrived. Then the next month drops, and panic sets in. That cycle creates emotional whiplash. One month feels like progress. The next feels like failure. But neither is actually telling the full story. Sustainable income isn't about how much you make once. It's about how consistently you can create opportunities for support. That consistency doesn't come from hype. It comes from structure. Clear offers, clear messaging, clear paths for people who want to support. When artists don't understand this difference, they chase spikes instead of building systems. They look for big moments to change everything, instead of focusing on repeatable actions that compound over time. Small money proves possibility. Sustainable money proves stability. And stability is what allows you to plan, invest, and grow without constant pressure. Until income becomes predictable, independence feels fragile. Once it does, everything changes. The goal isn't to avoid small money, it's to learn from it. To ask what created it, what supported it, and how to make it happen again without starting over. That's the shift most artists never make. This is something I've had to learn by living through it. For a long time, I thought money would show up once the work was undeniable, once the music was good enough, once enough people were paying attention. So I focused almost entirely on visibility. I celebrated plays. I paid attention to engagement. I told myself that support would come later, but later kept getting pushed back. What I didn't understand at the time was that attention doesn't automatically create trust, and trust is what leads to support. I had people listening, but I didn't give them a clear way to participate beyond that. No clear reason to invest. No clear path to support. So the attention stayed surface level. I also avoided thinking about money too early because it felt uncomfortable. It felt like I was putting the cart before the horse. Like talking about money meant I hadn't earned it yet. In reality, avoiding the money conversation delayed everything. Once I started paying attention to how money actually showed up, even in small ways, my perspective shifted. I stopped treating income like a reward and started treating it like feedback. Every dollar told a story. What people valued, what they were willing to support, what felt clear enough to act on. That feedback helped me make better decisions. Not louder ones, not trend-driven ones, but more intentional ones. The moment I stopped waiting for money to magically appear and started designing for support, things became clearer. Not easier, but clearer. And clarity is what turned effort into progress. If Independent Artist Game is helping you understand the money side of being independent a little more clearly, the simplest way to support what we're building is to like the video, share it with another artist, and subscribe. That small support helps this conversation reach people who are in the same place you might be right now. Working hard, but trying to make sense of how income actually works. And if you want to support beyond that, you can grab merch at southentmusic.com. Everything there helps keep this series independent, consistent, and focused on real conversations, not hype. Now let's bring this home. Making money as an independent artist isn't about crossing some invisible popularity line. It's about understanding how support actually forms. Most artists never make meaningful income not because their music isn't good. but because their system never asks for support in a clear, intentional way. They wait for money to arrive as a reward for effort. They assume attention will eventually turn into income on its own. They hope scale will solve problems that structure was meant to handle. But income doesn't appear automatically. It appears when you design for it, when you give people a reason to support, when you make that support feel natural, when you build trust slowly instead of chasing moments. $1,000 isn't a finish line. It's proof of concept. It means someone valued what you created enough to support it financially, and that matters more than any stream count. Once you cross that threshold, your thinking changes. You stop chasing validation. You stop relying on platforms to decide your worth. You start paying attention to what actually converts attention into support. That shift doesn't require a massive audience. It requires clarity. Clarity around what you're offering. Clarity around who it's for. Clarity around how people can participate beyond listening. Independent artists who last don't wait for permission to think about money. They understand that income is part of the creative ecosystem, not something separate from it. When you stop treating money like a taboo and start treating it like feedback, everything becomes clearer. You build intentionally. You move patiently. You stop chasing illusions. That's when independence stops feeling frustrating and starts feeling possible. That's the difference. That's the work. That's the game.